My name is Briana Florez, and I am completing my interview with a professional for family law and ethics, and I am here with Agent JR of the United States Border Patrol, and we are going to jump right in. Okay, how long have you been doing this job?
I've been with the Border Patrol almost 15 years.
Where are you?
Cruces, New Mexico Station. Our area of operations extends all the way from Anthony Exit 0 all the way to pretty much the county line with Deming, and then all the way south to Santa Teresa.
Okay.
To Santa Teresa.
Okay. Do you have any other prior law enforcement experience?
Yes, prior to the Border Patrol, I was employed with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, doing intel analysis for them.
And do you have an educational degree?
Yes, I have my degree in biology.
Okay. Finally, what made you decide to get into this field?
My father was career military and my mother was career law enforcement. My mother was born in Durango, Mexico, and my entire life she worked for immigration. She started off back in the late 80s when immigration was Immigration and Naturalization Service, the old INS. It transferred and the names changed, of course, to Legacy Customs and then to what is now DHS ICE. And so I just basically wanted to follow suit. Because that's what I knew.
Okay, so now we're going to get really into the tricky questions. What are some ethical areas that you find tricky or hard to approach when dealing with families on the job?
In my job, a lot of the times we encounter people who are making entry into the United States illegally or who have already made entry into the United States illegally, and they usually have family units with them, and there comes times in my job essentially be the bearer of bad news and execute laws that were already decided amongst these people. And it's really hard on us to, have to essentially break up families because you get somebody here who has been convicted as a deportable offense depending on what status they have, and let's say they've been here for 5 years, and within that 5 years they have children who were born within the United States. You cannot deport U.S. citizen children, but because the parents are not U.S. citizens, or because they've done something that has, U.S. citizens, or because they've done something that has, obliterated their status, they have to be deported back to their home country after serving whatever jail time they have. And that's a tough one on us because we have to deal with that on the daily.
So give me an example of what?
Like, let's say, for instance, somebody comes here and they come here on a B1, B2 visa, which is basically just they're coming here to travel, and like we get a lot of people from Asian countries who come in and they want to go to Disneyland, of course. Well, they give them a 30-day visa to come here to do all that. Well, a lot of times people come here and they just never leave. So we find out that this guy had a 30-day visa. Well, he stayed for 2 years and just has been living under the radar. Well, they end up coming through our checkpoints, and through checking their status and all that, we find that out, and they have violated their status and they have to go back home. So then comes the rough spot of, well, I'm sorry, pal, your 2 years you've been here has been wasted. Now you have to go back to wherever it is you're coming from. They're given the option to basically go to an immigration judge at that time and essentially plead their case, and the immigration judge is who decides whether or not they get deported or not. It's not us we are not the ones who make the decision. In that case, whether or not a person is formally deported on the spot is if we do what's called an expedited removal. And what that is if someone, let's say from a South American country, comes in within a certain time, if they've made illegal entry, if you come in illegally, between of making an asylum claim or anything because you broke the law to come in. So those guys right there, they get what's called an expedited removal, and they are formally deported. When is child separation
deemed necessary, and how do you decide when it's best for the child?
It's necessary to, honestly, it depends on what administration is in. I've 3 presidents so far, and they've all had different, policies on what we need to do. It's definitely necessary. Like with the example I gave before of having somebody who has already been convicted of a felony, or they have warrants for their arrest in other states. I had a gentleman one time that I caught in Deming, New Mexico, who had warrants for his arrest for rape in Washington State. And he was coming with his quote-unquote alleged niece. Me personally, I don't think that he was related to that girl at all. Couldn't prove it, but I don't think so. Because of his warrants for arrest in Washington, fortunately, in that case, we were able to get somebody who could take care of her, who was here in the United States. But there's that situation. It hasn't happened to me, but I know it's happened to other agents who have apprehended people who had felony warrants and stuff like that, and they've had to separate them from their family. In that case, one of the other aspects of our job is we have Title 21 authority, which basically gives us the ability to arrest the ability to arrest for drug violations. At our checkpoint, a lot of time we encounter families, United States citizen families, USC families, where people are smuggling high amounts of narcotics through our entire family with them, and at that time the parents are separated from their children. The parents go to jail, and the kids go. A lot of times they go to other members of the family, but depending on the circumstances, there may be chances where, child protective services have to be called to.
What are some specific laws that go into play when you are dealing with immigrant families or families in which parents are offended?
There are guidelines and policies we have to follow on the station level and on the national level when it comes to separating families. It's not necessarily a border patrol policy as much as it is like a correctional facility policy. For example, anybody who commits a crime, like if you're driving in your car, you are going to be separated from your kid because they're not going to allow you to take your child with you to prison. All right, but as far as specific laws, I think it was in 2015, that there was an actual Supreme Court decision that came down regarding juveniles in our detainment facilities. It was called the Briana Florez decision, and it basically stated that juveniles cannot be held in our facilities for longer than 20 days. So if it was going to take longer than 20 days to get them a court, an immigration court date or any of that other stuff like that, we had to release them into the United States, basically on their own recognizance. And what happened was they would give us an address to basically forward them the false addresses, and these people were basically they would allowed to disappear into the United States. We'd never see them again. So that's one of the laws that we have to deal with all the time. Dealing with that, we are constantly refreshed on that every year. I believe we have to take a refresher course on that law to basically remember what it is that we can and can't do. It comes back to bite us a lot of the times because the people who were smuggling, the criminals basically who were smuggling, the people who were smuggling, the criminals basically who were smuggling people in know that there's a loophole in that law, and they will not allow unaccompanied minors to just go off on their own into the United States. So what they do is they'll come here as what we call a family unit, or with them they were basically allowed to go free into the United States. There were a lot of times where we saw people taking advantage of that, where people would claim that the child that was with them was a relative, but you could tell that that kid did not belong to them at all. There were multiple times but because we couldn't prove it, because the laws make it where we cannot take fingerprints of minors or any of that other stuff like that, we basically had to take the people's word for it, and it allowed people to gain entry into the United States illegally with basically, no repercussions. Legally with basically, no repercussions. What was your other question on that? Are there any trainings you guys...
Okay, how about what are the steps you have to do when you know that you're going to have to separate a family?
Well, when that happens, a lot of the times, the first thing we try to do is find someone who could take responsibility of the child. A lot of times people make an entry into the United States, they have people who are already here. Whether, in that case, be honest with, want the child to go to somebody who could take care of them. There was an example that happened to me. I was fresh into my career, and I actually tell everybody this was the worst day of my job. I was doing a bus check on a Greyhound bus, and in the very back of the bus there was a family that turned out to be from Honduras. The husband and the wife were from Honduras. They had been living in Massachusetts for about 5 years. The guy made his entry 5 years prior, stayed family. So I go and talk to the guy. He spoke perfect English. I end up talking to him, and he tells me that he's from Honduras. And then when I ask him for his immigration paperwork to be in the country, he didn't have any. And so he basically admitted to me to being in the country illegally, him and his wife, U.S. citizen-born children. So through doing our investigation on what we could do with this guy, before that, I actually thought, you know what, this will be fine. What will happen is I'll keep the husband here with me, and I'll allow the wife to go on to Phoenix with the children. Well, the wife didn't want to do that. She wanted to stay with her husband. Long story short, she had the equivalent of a 5th grade education, was completely dependent on the husband for everything, and basically said that she could not survive without her husband. And so I had to take everybody at that point without her husband. So we came into problems later on because it turned out that this guy was ordered deported in absentia. What that means is when he made his entry, he was caught in Massachusetts for being in the country illegally, and he was given a court date to go to an immigration judge and basically plead his case. Well, he never showed up. So that's like with us, if you're giving a court date and you don't show up, they give you a bench warrant. If you get a bench warrant, you're going to go to jail when you get caught for whatever it is, traffic violation or whatever. They're going to put you in jail so you can go face your judge. Well, what happens with us in that case is, or the order in absentia, makes it to where if you're caught, you are automatically formally deported because the judge has ruled that since you didn't bother to show up, you're getting deported. So that's what happened to this guy. I didn't have anything I can do at that time to help him because he was already formally deported. So that gentleman was... The problem came in where the wife flipped out about all that, and we were not going to deport her. We were going to allow her to go to Phoenix with the children, but when she came and told us that as soon as she gets to Phoenix, she's walking to Honduras with her children, that then puts us in a position to where we have to think of the kids' safety. You can't, this is all in Spanish, of course. I'm like, ma'am, you can't say those things like that because you're going to force me into a position where I have to consider your children over you. And so she wanted to go to the immigration camp with her husband, and they were not going to allow her children to go in there with her because it's a correction. And they were not going to allow her children to go in there with her because it's a correctional facility. No underage kids could go in there. So after hours and hours of trying to figure out what to do, I even suggested, because they had at the time, I think she was a 3-year-old little girl and a 5-year-old little boy. At the time, I think she was a 3-year-old little girl and a 5-year-old little boy. I suggested them to try to let me to adopt that little girl because I had no children at the time, me and my wife at the time, and I really felt I could have gave that girl a better life than she ever known. And they tried to go with it, but long story short, it didn't happen. And services and Health and Human Services to come and take those children because the family they had in the United States that we called would not come to get them because they were all here illegally and they believed that it was a trap to come arrest them. No matter how many times I told them that that was not the case, we just needed someone to come pick up the kids. So it left us with no other option than to call Child Protective Services, Health and Human Services, and they came and took those kids away from their parents. And it was the worst thing I ever had to see at that time. I had bought that little girl and that little boy toys from the Walgreens next door, teddy bears, candies, anything I could to try to make them not worry so much, and everything was fine up until Child Protective Services came and took the boy one way and took the little girl the other way.
Okay.
And
last question. How has your job experience changed each time under different presidencies? What presidencies have you served under the Border Patrol, and how did their term affect your work environments and encounters with families? For example, their demeanor with you, their resistance, willing to cooperate, just these types of things.
Well, in 15 years, I have worked under 3 presidents. I think when I first got in 2006, and that was 2 years left under Bush Jr. When I got on with him, it was essentially the Wild West out here. It was, we were allowed a lot more discretion under Bush, which is basically we could get somebody and instead of formally deport them, we could give them what was called a voluntary return, which is basically let's say I checked the bus and there was someone here illegally who just made entry. I could ask him, okay, listen, man, you got a choice. You could voluntarily return to Mexico with just a record saying you've been caught once, that's it, but no kind of crime. It's literally a slap on the wrist. Or you could go to the immigration jail and wait for a judge to plead your case. Well, a lot of the people, of course, would take, I'll just go back to Mexico, because as soon as they got back into Mexico, they'd try to come in again. That I actually thought was cool in a way because, a lot of people coming in are just guys trying to better their life or whatever the situation may be, and I get that. I'm sympathetic to that, but unfortunately the law is written. I'm sympathetic to that, but unfortunately the law is written a certain way for a reason, and so to me, I felt that was kind of cool. All right, listen, dude, you haven't committed a felony. You're not Hannibal Lecter or anything like that. Go back to Mexico. If you're going to try to come given that leeway to give them that option. Under Barack Obama, a lot of people don't know this or they chose to forget it. He actually implemented a zero tolerance policy. During his first administration, Barack Obama was actually very, very hardcore on immigration. He had a very strong immigration stance. We actually had a nickname for him, a deporter in chief. I deported more people under Barack Obama than I had any of the other presidents I worked for. He was very big on that. Under his zero tolerance policy, the initiative was basically when it first kicked off was the intent was to prosecute all amenable adults. So there was no group that was excluded from that. So, you violated 8 U.S.C. 1325, illegal entry into the United States, and you were formally deported. Whereas before we were given that voluntary return option under Bush, under Obama, we weren't. Everybody was getting prosecuted for making illegal entry. And it was good in the fact that after a year or two of doing that, the actual illegal immigration numbers declined a whole lot. People stopped making entry into the United States because they knew if they got caught that they were going to go to jail and get formally deported. So it's good as far as a deterrent. And then it was that way for a long time. I remember an interview with Barack Obama for a long time. It's impossible to find now because the way the media works, of course, where he was doing an interview talking about the children coming through and how hard it was for them and how dangerous it was for them to make these journeys with these people. Dangers and horrors they have to face going through, riding on top of trains in South America, walking through, the desert for hundreds of miles and basically possibly being left to die, all that stuff like that. And Barack Obama was real big on spanking people. There was that with him. On his second term, things began to change towards the end of his presidency. His immigration stance completely flipped. He went from, being a real hard charger on immigration to basically saying that, our immigration system is broken and we need to make it easier for people to come in. And that's when he implemented the whole DACA and DAPA saying that children who were brought into the country illegally as children and have lived here their whole time, they're basically given a 2-year renewal process to stay here and be able to stay. The DAPA one he had on that actually got canceled. Basically, they didn't go along with that one. Was for the parents, basically saying, okay, well, if we offer that for the children who are here illegally, who came in illegally as children, we need to offer it for their parents. But the difference being is, the children didn't have a choice, and that the parents did that. So if the DAPA part would have happened, it would have basically given amnesty to, a very large number of people who came in illegally. Well, that didn't happen. So they kept the DACA part and didn't do the DAPA. It's funny, one of the things he said, because he used to say so many bad things about Barack Obama, but the one thing he said that he agreed about Obama was his immigration stance. He said that he agreed with Barack Obama 100% on his views on immigration up until it came time for the new election. And I think that had to do with, the candidates coming in big on immigration reform and open borders and allowing the people who are here to stay and all that stuff. So Barack Obama had to start paving the way for that view of thought. Now under Trump, the migrant caravan. Under Trump, the migrant caravans came through under Trump, so that became his problem, and all the laws that were in place were basically put on Trump administration policy, saying this is the way that they wanted it to be. And that's actually not the case. Those laws and everything were in place well before Trump was in office. He was just his laws. They were basically saying that Trump was putting kids in cages and separating families. Well, I mean, that happened under every president, and that is not like I said before, that's not a border patrol policy, that's a corrections policy. No correctional facility is going to allow you to bring underage children. No correctional facility is going to allow you to bring underage children inside of it, okay, to just stay with their parents. When the migrant caravans came here and, everybody was pushing for the stopping of child separation and family separation and stuff like that, a lot of people don't know that Trump actually signed an executive order halting child and family separation at the border. He's the only president who, in history, as far as how the different presidencies have changed, are under Bush, it was pretty simple. I mean, of course, there were times where, you know, people hear horror stories on their journeys from South America and Mexico to here about how we are the boogeymen. They see that, you know, we're actually not like that. It's pretty tame, and when they see that we're trying to work with them, it's okay. Under Obama, towards the end of his presidency, his second term, things started to get a lot more hostile with us. We got a lot more resistance from you know, people we caught and people bringing them in, and not just that, but U.S. citizens who came to basically, you know, chastise us for doing our job. There was a case here in Las Cruces where it was actually in town, and there was 4 guys driving in a car that I had already apprehended once. I knew who these guys were. And so I pulled them over and arrested them again. And this goofy white lady comes up to me and starts screaming at me in the middle of a parking lot and basically chewed me out, telling me how can I, you know, how do I sleep at night, and how could I do such a terrible job, and I'm a monster, and all this stuff like that. And I went right to her, took my name tag off, of course, because I didn't need her, you know, reporting me for this. But I went up to her and I asked her, I was like, ma'am, do you know these 4 guys? She said no. And I said, well, let me tell you what I know about these guys. One of them had already been arrested for rape. Another one had 2 DUIs that caused accidents. And so I was like, so you have these guys here. I'm like, do you have children? Yes, I have daughters. I was like, would you feel fine with me leaving that guy who's already been here arrested for rape in the same area as, you know, where your kids are? And she told me, she's like, no, I'm not talking about them. Those guys are monsters and they need to go. And I said, how am I supposed to know who it is I have until I catch them? And then I gave her an example of something that could honestly get me fired. That exact same day, probably about 3 hours before, I had a trainee with me at the time. We pulled over a family off on Doña Ana. It was a husband, a wife, 2 USC kids. Doña Ana. It was a husband, a wife, 2 USC kids. They had been here about 2 years, as illegal as could be, didn't speak any kind of English, should have been deported that day. But because they had the kids with them and they were a block away from their house, I told them, today's your lucky day, pal. Go home. Don't come back out. Praised me for being a good guy and all that stuff. And I told that lady that, and, you know, it changed her mind. She probably thought I was lying to her, but I wasn't. It was the dead truth. We had just let an entire family go, but I arrested 4 scumbags, and it made me the devil. You know, so that's the kind of things that I have to deal with on a lot. It's really bad now under Trump because of our political climate that we're in and all that stuff. You know, I mean, people don't realize that it's not us doing this job who are making the decisions. We are just doing the job that we signed up to do. You know, we have no say in what the laws are or what the policies are. We have no say on who should be here and who should not. Our job is to enforce the law, and that's it. And, you know, now we're getting people peaceful protesting. I don't know what's peaceful about throwing bricks and bottles at us, but we have that all the time. We have people coming through the checkpoints with their political agendas, trying to start fights with us on things like that. So because of the political climate we're in right now, it's a lot more now under this presidency. People are a lot less willing to cooperate now with certain things, no matter how cordial we're being with them or how easy we're trying to make pass for them. It's just straight resistance. It's a lot. Now it's just straight resistance. it's a lot harder to do my job now with all the quote unquote political red tape, the way the media is portraying us. Everybody now, anytime I make any kind of arrest, there's always somebody with a camera watching everything I do, which puts me in danger because I'm sitting there watching everything I do, which puts me in danger because I'm sitting there watching the person with the camera, trying to, keep my eye on them when I should be keeping my eye on the subject that I'm arresting. Those are the type of things I got to deal with.
Comments or things you'd like to address?
Yeah, you talked earlier about, being put in ethical situations. There's lots of times where you get people I arrest people on my job who are just regular people, good people who are just trying to make a living, but yet I'm aware that they've come in illegally and therefore have broken the law. And it puts me in a position of, man, should I just let this guy go because, he's just doing what I'm doing at the same time, trying to make a better life for me and my family? Or, do I do what I swore to uphold? We got a guy one year on a bus, came in illegally, and it was on Christmas Eve that we arrested that guy, and he was trying to go to Colorado for Christmas and surprise him. And the agent who caught him brought this old guy off the bus, and that guy was just crying and crying and crying because all he wanted to do was see his family for Christmas. And it made us all feel like dirt, and we gave a hard time that day. And of course, way to go, save the world. You arrested one old man on Christmas. How are you bettering society? And, of course, razzing him about it. And, guys, what do I do? Do I let him go? He's here illegally. What do you want me to do? And I get his point. It's our job. Illegally. What do you want me to do? And I get his point. It's our job. And like I said before, you never know who it is that you caught until after you get them and process them. I mean, I had a guy one time who I thought was the sweetest guy in the world. He was as friendly, and I roll his fingerprints, and he had already been arrested for murder. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, "Oh, this is a good guy." It's hard to put to sit there and think about that of like, oh, well, could I have just let this guy go and everything would have been okay? What if it did something bad and I found out? That would have been on me, and I would have to sit there and accept the fact that somebody's life has dramatically changed because I did not do my job. But getting back to the point of your questions, when it comes to family law, when it comes to family law, and child separation in my field and stuff like that, unfortunately, it is an element that's always going to be there anytime you're doing any kind of law enforcement job, whether it be me specifically like that. There's going to be circumstances and cases where children are involved. Take domestic abuse and domestic violence situations where you have a parent who's putting their family in danger, and they come and separate the families for those kids. It's going to it's going to take a toll on the kid, and it's going to make an impact on their life. We say as officers that we're hoping that it will make a better impact on their life, even though we know it's kind of scarring to be put in that situation and see the things that the kids have to go through, and basically know us, the guys in the badges, as the people who took their parents away from them. That's a convince somebody that we're not the bad person by doing that, but it's just it's a part of the job that we have to face. There's times where a lot of the times we do everything we can to keep that from happening. We make sure we listen to children together. A lot of times it works, a lot of times it doesn't. It all, and no case is ever the same. That is one of the hard things that we deal with on our job all the time. And we get a bad rap in the media, unfortunately, as being the guys who are just going basically hunting for people, and it's really not the case. We there's been lots of times where I've given kids or families or people out there that I've apprehended out there in the dirt. I've given them my food. I've given them my water. I've bought toys for the kids, anything we can to try to make them more comfortable, because it's not the kids' fault that they're in the situation they're in, and we're well aware of that. We get a bad rap of just being machines out there, but to be honest with you, a lot of us, we are extremely compassionate and to that these people are going through, and not all of them are criminals. Some people are legit fleeing their country. Some people are legit trying to look for a better life. The problem is we don't know that until after we've apprehended them. So it's one of those things that once they're there with us, and it's one of those things that once they're there with us, and we see the situations people are in, we actually do everything we can to try to make things as minimal of a stressful situation for them. We try to get people the easiest deals based on we have to operate within the guidelines of the law, because that is our job. Our job is to uphold the laws of the Constitution, and unfortunately it comes down sometimes where we have no choice but to separate the families. I've had situations where a member of the family has already been arrested in the United States for, violent crimes and violent felonies, and those guys are going to jail, as well they should. If you're a U.S. citizen and you commit a violent crime or a violent felony, you should go to jail. So just because you're coming in from another country, I don't think excludes you from that. And if they have their child, I don't think excludes you from that. And if they have their child with them at that time, sometimes I think it's best for the child to be separated from their parent, for their well-being. We do a lot we can to try to take care of the kids in this job, because all of us have families. We all have children. We all see our kids and these kids, and our heart melts for them when we see the situations they're in or what they've been through to get here. And